Have I seen Bass Roger Pink Floyd clip? No. Like a guy who's like somehow even dumber than Caleb Morton with all the same opinions, having an argument with like the avatar of like a generic liberal. Whenever Roger Waters said something that I might ostensibly agree with, I get a huge amount of embarrassment. He's an incredibly dumb person. That he made some songs 40 years ago doesn't make him not stupid. How about we watch the Roger Waters clip and I point out every time he says something stupid. Now, it's not that I don't think the other guy that he was talking to is stupid. I absolutely do. But the thing is, one of them is like a generic liberal. And everyone already knows, at least everyone who watches this stream should already know that generic liberals are fucking morons.
Communism is based.
But some of you seem unable to understand that Roger Waters is also a fucking moron. So this is the start of the interview.
F off to the bar right now. At the outset of the show?
Yeah.
Because
it's a really good way to start the show. But apart from anything else, it sets a few things straight.
Namely?
Also it encourages a lot of the people who have come to the show, because they have listened to everything I've written since 1965 or whenever I started writing songs. So they do know what my politics are, and they do understand where my heart is, and they understand sort of why I'm there. But maybe it also gives a message to people who don't want to be there, in which case them effing off to the bar is probably not a bad idea.
When does he actually start talking about issues?
Their religion, their nationality, or anything else. Because if this is not a drill has a message, it is that we have to communicate one with the other.
To the guy who says, shut the F up, play the hits, do you want him, as long as he doesn't shout it out, do you want him in the arena?
I don't not want him there, so long as he doesn't annoy the people who do understand what's going on in the arena. I'm happy for him.
But I'm saying, like, do I have to buy in? Does a person in the crowd have to buy in to the message? I've always loved the music.
Right.
Some of the messages I can buy into, and some I can't.
I've only got one message. Two strangers passing in the street, by chance two passing glances meet, and I am you, and what I see is me. That is my message. And that was on Medal, which was in 1970. And basically, my message hasn't changed. I recognize your humanity, but I recognize all the Russians and the Chinese and the Ukrainians.
This is where the juicy stuff starts. He took the interview in this direction himself, apparently.
And the Palestinians.
Are you an equal opportunity offender on this tour? Here's why I ask. I remember the last tour. Of course, I came and watched. Very much, about Trump. And in the current show, you've got a montage of war criminals, according to you, and a picture apparently of President Biden on...
Oh, it starts out with the interviewer getting offended that someone would call Biden a criminal. He was fine with it when it was Trump, but when it's Biden, that's when he gets pissed off.
The screen, and it says, just get
This reminds me recently, there was an article that I saw the other day. I'm not going to go looking for it, but it definitely exists, and it's not like it's an unbelievable thing. The tagline of the article was like, the reason why Trump is being targeted as a criminal is not because he was the president, it's because he is the first criminal president. And I saw that and I just shit my fucking pants at how just objectively and obviously wrong that is. The liberals are fine with it when it's Trump, but not when it's Biden.
Started. What's that all about?
President Joe Biden?
Yeah.
Well, he's fueling the fire in the Ukraine for a start. That.
And for one, this is absolutely the dumbest fucking thing to cite for Biden being a war criminal is fueling the fire in Ukraine. In every single way, it's terrible because Ukraine is defending in this case. Blaming Joe Biden for the Russian invasion of Ukraine doesn't make any sense. Of course, the US has done a ton of shit to lead towards this happening, but that doesn't mean that the primary party who is at fault isn't the party that carried out the fucking invasion. Somehow it's Joe Biden who's been the president of the USA for like a couple of years. When you say Joe Biden war criminal, and the first thing that comes to mind for you isn't, well, he was the vice president for 8 years of fucking Barack Obama, who did things like, for example, destroy Libya, continue the occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan, etc. And the best thing you can come up with for Joe Biden being a war criminal is Ukraine. No, that's so fucking stupid. You're going to get skewered on that because it's fucking stupid. That's the only reason you think Joe Biden's a war criminal. That's the first thing that comes to mind out of everything. There's so much that you can go for. Yeah, the sanctions on Afghanistan right now. Joe Biden is intentionally starving countless people in Afghanistan. He's supporting the Saudi Arabian regime that genocides and has genocided Yemen. And the best thing that you get on him is Ukraine. That's the first thing that comes to mind for you regarding his supposed war criminality. Is Ukraine? It's just the worst possible argument. And honestly, I think Roger Waters is so stupid that the only reason he's calling Joe Biden a war criminal is because of Ukraine.
There's a huge...
There's no fucking way. Like, of all the things that Joe Biden has done, not doing enough to secure peace in Ukraine is incredibly far down the list of his war crimes, okay?
crime. Why won't the United States of America encourage...
Like, this is the idiocy of these pro-Russia talking points. And they are pro-Russia talking points. Look, it doesn't matter that, yeah, liberals are absolutely just completely obsessed with denying any sort of, any sort of culpability for the US in causing this. Obviously, yeah. That doesn't mean that the problem here is that Joe Biden isn't encouraging Zelensky to negotiate with Russia. The problem here is primarily that Russia invaded Ukraine. Everything else is obviously, it doesn't matter if it's bad. It's so much less bad than that it boggles the mind to even mention it in a case like this. Joe Biden is a war criminal because he won't tell Zelensky to negotiate with an unelected fascist leader who invaded his country. Of all the bad things that Joe Biden has done, that's pretty fucking far down the list, my dude. Why is it the first one that comes to mind for you?
Zelensky, the president, to negotiate, obviating the need for this horrific, horrendous war.
But you're
obviating the need. So the war only happened because Joe Biden didn't tell Zelensky to negotiate? Is that really it? If only Joe Biden had told Zelensky to just give up like 40% of his country's territory to Russia, this all could have been avoided. Great fucking point, dude. It's one thing to be angry at the massively disproportionate attention being paid to Ukraine, when absolutely none of that is afforded to any of the USA's enemies. It's another thing to completely fucking lie to find these roundabout reasons to support Russia. There are so many better ways to make the sorts of arguments that he wants to make here. But the thing is, he's just like objectively pro-Russia. So he can't make the good arguments. He has to make the arguments that somehow apologize for Russia. He can't make an argument that is like anti-US and also anti-Russia. He can't do that. He's not allowed to do that because he's objectively pro-Russia. You know, you can't be pro-Russia because it doesn't make any fucking sense. There's not any sort of consistency with any sort of remote leftist ideas in doing that. So he has to make these idiotic arguments that are just inherently stupid as fuck.
It's killing.
You're blaming.
We don't know how many Ukrainians.
But you're blaming the party that got invaded.
Biden is killing those countless Ukrainians. Joe Biden, and really not even Joe Biden, the US, because Biden's only been the president for a very short amount of time, has certainly played its part in not de-escalating tensions with another great power. But ultimately, the decision to invade is still on that other power. Well, to call Russia a great power is incorrect, a regional power. But ultimately, Russia still has agency. It's not a fucking wolf. It's not a fucking wild animal, okay? Russia is the country that decided to invade. It's that simple.
Come on, you've got it reversed.
That's, you know, any war, when did it start? What you need to do is look at the history and you can say, well, it started on this day. You could say it started in 2008, okay? This war is basically about the action and reaction of NATO pushing right up to the Russian border, which they promised they wouldn't do when...
It doesn't fucking matter if they promised it, which they did, by the way. Because even if NATO is pushing up to the fucking Russian border, that's no justification for Russia invading fucking Ukraine, destroying half the country, killing what is going to amount to hundreds of thousands of people. Absolutely no fucking justification for that. Russia's geopolitical interests do not justify it invading Ukraine. It doesn't have some right to invade Ukraine if it's been wronged by another power. This is not how things work. And the only way this logic works is if you are in like this sort of campus logic, which a lot of the people supporting the American and Ukrainian side are definitely, and don't get me wrong, where like one power doing a bad thing justifies you doing an even worse thing in response somehow. No, it fucking doesn't. There is practically nothing that the USA could have done here that would have justified a full-scale fucking invasion of Ukraine with the intentions to essentially annex half of the country into Russia. Literally nothing. Doesn't fucking matter what he says here because it's all completely invalid to support the argument that he's making. It's literally, yeah, it is Israel logic.
Gorbachev negotiated the withdrawal of the USSR from the whole of Eastern Europe.
When you say this, then I have to say, what about our role as liberators? You of all people.
Yeah, this guy here is an incredibly fucking dumb moron. It's like the unstoppable Russia supporter against the immovable liberal. It's a fucking train wreck. What about our role as liberators? What the fuck, man? You think the Russians don't say the same thing about themselves? This is the thing. Like, the liberal doesn't have the arguments that I do about this. The liberal's argument is that he actually accepts what Roger Waters said there is true. Like, he accepts that, oh yeah, okay, so Biden did do that, so NATO did do that, but he's like, we did it and it was good. He he doesn't have like a framework to contest this beyond just saying, well, that happened and it was good. Oh man, both of these people are so stupid. I can't believe that anyone could think that either of them isn't.
You have no role as liberators.
World War II? World War II? You
got into
World War II! World War II! The one time in fucking history when the USA wasn't just objectively on the side of aggressive imperialism. A war that they only entered because they were attacked and forced into it. He's somehow bringing that up to justify some shit that's happening today. It's so fucking irrelevant. Like, if we extend the liberal logic here to today, what about World War II? Okay, so Russia played a huge part in winning World War II, far more than any of the Western Allied powers. Does that mean that anything that Russia does automatically makes them liberators? I'm just using the same logic that the liberals using here. I obviously don't believe this, but just to demonstrate how fucking stupid it is.
Because
Come on.
Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor. You were completely isolationist until that sad, that devastating,
I would argue we
awful
were
day
always going to get in, and that
1941.
pushed us in. But thank God the United States got in.
The United States' strategy during World War II, if you don't know, was to wait as long as possible to enter the war to reap as much benefit from it as possible. By benefit, I mean economic benefit. The war was massive for the USA because it gave them an excuse to form a state-led wartime economy as one of the only countries in the war with their main homeland completely untouched by the war itself. There was practically no bombing of American factories. You know, life in the American mainland itself was completely uninterrupted. And the plan pretty much all along was, to eventually enter the war, but as late as possible in order to like take advantage of the fact that the rest of the world was practically mostly destroyed. Not mostly, but the rest of the world that was actually involved in the war was incredibly fucking hurt by it, while the US was practically untouched, and use that to supplant Britain as the main world power, which they did. It worked out perfectly for them. The worst L ever of FDR was that, because his plan was fucking brilliant and it worked perfectly. Huge fucking L, FDR.
Right? You lost your father in World War II. Thank God the United States.
But thank God the Russians had already won the bloody war almost by then. And don't forget, 23 million Russians died.
I mean, this is true. This is true, what is he saying here. But I do not understand how they're talking about World War II. This is like literally the least relevant thing to what they were talking about in the first place. Like, the liberal brings up something irrelevant, and Waters has relevant historical facts to counter his arguments, but it's still completely fucking irrelevant.
Protecting you and me from the Nazi menace.
This is the liberal argument here. It's like, the US are liberators. We were the good guys in World War II, and Waters is like, well, Russia were also the good guys in World War II. So by the liberals' logic, I guess that means that Russia is right to invade Ukraine because they were right in World War II. Like, obviously, this is an incredibly fucking stupid argument, but like, the liberal just got himself into this fucking mess by bringing that up. It's so stupid.
And you would think the Russians would have learned their lesson from war and wouldn't have invaded Ukraine.
Well, you,
Fair?
with all your reading, I would suggest you, Michael, that you go away and read a bit more and then try and figure out what the United States would do if the Chinese were putting nuclear-armed missiles into Mexico and Canada.
The Chinese are too busy encircling Taiwan as we speak.
Now look, Waters did make a good point there. I mean, from a geopolitical point of view, now, this sort of power projection of putting fucking nukes in countries on the other side of the world, it would be shitty if anyone does it. The USA right now is really the only country that does it, though. That's true. But like, I don't like this argument. I don't like to make this sort of argument because while it's a reasonable point, it's the same sort of thing as the dumb liberal talking point that we had a second ago. Making an argument against them on their own terms. And the problem with this is, Roger Waters is okay to argue with them on these terms because he thinks Russia is good. He is essentially a campus for Russia in its geopolitical struggle against the West, against the US, etc. He can make that argument because for him, the problem here is it's not that the USA, like putting fucking nukes and missiles in countries on the other side of the world, is wrong and bullshit. It's that the USA is doing that to Russia. You know, this is something that apparently it would be okay for Russia to do, it would be okay for China to do. But this guy's response to that is not even respond to the point. Because yeah, it is true that liberals, at least in their own sort of framework, are hypocrites on this. They would like fucking twist themselves into fucking, like what's something that's twisted? I don't know, into something that is twisted, okay? Pretend that I came up with a clever thing that is twisted there, trying to like come up with some roundabout way where it wouldn't be the same if it was done to the USA. And we know what the USA does when these things happen, because the USA practically shit themselves when the Soviet Union put nuclear missiles in Cuba.
They're not encircling Taiwan. Taiwan is part of China, and that's been
Now, this is a stupid fucking argument here. First, the guy's like, well, China's too busy encircling Taiwan. It doesn't really matter what the argument is regarding Taiwanese sovereignty. It doesn't matter if you think Taiwan should be independent, that it shouldn't be independent, that it's China, that it's not China. If China is encircling Taiwan, well, the USA has had Cuba encircled for literally 70 fucking years, 60 fucking years. Okay, what Waters said wasn't that China is simply doing something bad to one of its neighbors. What he was saying was that the USA is putting missiles on literally the other side of the fucking world, not just doing that, but also doing something else. So even if we accept the response here as valid, it's not the same thing. At best, he's claiming that China is doing something, even if we accept his logic wholesale, that China is doing something that the US is also doing, plus more. It's like the dumb Caleb Morpenite pro-Russia sort of guy coming up against the even dumber liberal.
absolutely accepted by the whole of the international community since 1948. And if you don't know that, you're not reading enough. Go and read about it.
Okay, did we solve anything here today?
Yeah.
The liberal, like, look, Waters has shitty arguments here. His arguments are very stupid. They're very dumb. It's essentially just making statements without really elaborating on them very much as to how they counter what the other guy is saying or whatever. But the other guy is so much fucking worse because Waters makes those statements and he hasn't tried to actually explain why they're wrong, why they don't apply. He just says, what about this? What about that? For people who talk about whataboutism all the time, liberals sure do use that. The same fucking tactic that they tend to say is invalid a lot. And, you know, it's one thing to bring up hypocrisy, because generally whataboutism is used to essentially try and shut down claims that the USA and the West and its supporters are being hypocritical. Like, for example, what I just said. This guy's like, China is encircling Taiwan. I say, well, the USA has encircled Cuba for the last 60 years. They would say whataboutism to that, but it's not whataboutism. I'm pointing out hypocrisy. I'm saying that you are doing the same thing that you're denouncing this other country for doing, specifically in an argument about how your country isn't as bad as this other country, right? So it's incredibly valid because your point there that your country isn't as bad as this other country is obviously invalid, and my argument shows you why. And they say whataboutism to that. Now, the difference here is that this guy is like, for example, Roger Waters said, it's bad that the USA puts missiles and shit in countries that are near Russia, near China. And this guy's response to that was to say, well, China is too busy encircling Taiwan. That has nothing to do with it. Now, if he had said, for example, but China's also putting missiles in Mexico, that would have been a valid argument because he's just simply pointing out that they're both doing the same thing. But he can't because China's not doing that, is it? So he needs to bring up something fucking wholly different that the USA also itself happens to be doing. That is actual whataboutism. That is an actual fallacy. It's a great explanation of that there. The fact of the matter is that the USA doesn't even believe in these Taiwan sovereignty arguments themselves because they are against the same sort of arguments being used in many different situations. Like in pro-Russian breakaway territories of Ukraine, by the way, in the same way. Taiwan was taken from China by a fascist breakaway government that had lost the civil war that then, declared itself the true government of China from Taiwan or whatever. This situation really isn't much different than pro-Russia separatists taking up arms and declaring independence, whether the local population is pro or against it. So to be in favor of one but not the other is completely nonsensical. And that goes for both sides too. If you support, for example, Crimea or the Republic of Donetsk being a part of Russia, it doesn't make any sense for you to be against Taiwanese independence. Anyway, there's only a minute left in this. It's pretty substanceless. Roger Waters was very stupid to even mention the things that he was mentioning at the start, like his justifications for the invasion of Ukraine, somehow blaming the invasion of Ukraine on Joe Biden rather than the Russian government that carried it out. Is completely nonsensical. But every response that the guy had to that is so much stupider than his initial argument that it makes Roger Waters look like a fucking genius, man.
Yeah, we did. Well, I mean, no, we didn't. Because you're believing your propaganda, your side's propaganda.
You're defining it as
Taiwan,
propaganda.
you can't have a conversation about human rights, and you can't have a conversation about Taiwan without actually doing the reading.
Roger, if you're having a conversation about human rights, at the top of the list of offenders are the Chinese.
Every fucking response is the same. The top of the list of offenders on human rights is the USA. Top of the list, let's go through the list. USA, Israel, Saudi Arabia. Those are definitely the top three. Definitely. Unambiguous of the top three. And it just so happens that they're all allies. They're all allies of the USA.
Why is it always the
Is
Western
that at
world?
the top of your list?
Why is it
the
always
Chinese
the Western
didn't
world?
invade Iraq and kill 1 million people in 2003. In fact,
Indeed,
as far
they
as I can
didn't.
recall, hang on a minute. Who of the Chinese?
It's funny because even if we accept the most outlandish claims made in the Western media, for example, 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camps, well, the USA outright killed 1 million people in Iraq. Who the fuck are they? And who the fuck are you to denounce them? Leave it to people like, like me, for example. I haven't killed 1 million people in Iraq. I don't support any country that has killed 1 million people in Iraq. So maybe leave it to people who are fucking sane and not themselves mass murderers to denounce those sort of things, please. Because you just make your side, you just make the cause that you claim to be supporting look worse by having you associated with it.
Chinese invaded and murdered, slaughtered.
Their own.
Bollocks.
Okay.
That's
Their own?
absolute
What?
nonsense. Complete nonsense.
What, their own? What did he just say, imply that Iraqis slaughtered themselves?
Who of the Chinese invaded and murdered, slaughtered?
Their own.
Oh, their own?
Okay.
Who is he talking about? Who have they slaughtered? How? When? And when have the Chinese done like a massive armed conflict in China and killed 1 million people? When? What is he talking about? He's talking about like the fucking Taiping Rebellion? Like what the fuck?
Absolute nonsense. Complete nonsense.
What is he laughing at? It's just so self-assured. God, like Roger Waters is stupid, but it's hard to be as angry at him when he's talking to this fucking smug liberal egg.
Go away and read, but read some proper.
Hey, my problem is I spend too much time reading your liner notes, okay? Thank you for doing this.
Thank
I appreciate
you for
it.
talking to me. It's
All right.
always a pleasure.
Is it? Okay.
Wow. Well, this is a fucking train wreck. This is an absolute train wreck. This wouldn't even pass as like an interesting fucking Twitch politics segment, let alone an interesting one-on-one, supposedly enlightening political interview. That's just fucking terrible. I can't believe this is getting like the airtime and being propped up like it was some sort of incredible expose or something on either party involved here. It's just embarrassing.